The Shabbat, there are actually two parshiot of the Torah designated. It is a byproduct of the fact that the number of parshiot in the Torah and the number of weeks in a year don't always work out equally, especially or even during a leap year. And so certain parshiot, the shorter ones, are partnered up so as to allow us to get all the way through the Torah in the course of the year. And so this Shabbat, we read the Parshiot Achrei and Kedoshim. And Parashat Kedoshim is a fascinating articulation of what it means to put Torah first in our lives. As we read the parasha, we see that we are constantly going back and forth between ritual and ethical injunctions and commands. The Torah, if you will, is weaving together, uniting both the personal behavior that we are to engage in with the collective behavior of the Jewish people. The self acts as part of a community. The service of God and the service of humanity are woven into a single fabric to emphasize that neither can exist fully without the other. The Torah proclaims, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." It affirms the possibility that we, as flawed and as human as we are, can attain a measure of holiness that brings us into the realm of heaven and into the proximity of the Holy One. That command to be like God is followed by sort of an introduction of practical stuff. Serve the true God rather than the idols of your own creation. The next verse, take care of the poor and the stranger. Do not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. Reprove your fellow rather than storing up hatred in your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. In the Torah, rather than dwelling on this climactic utterance for even a moment, it moves on from one of the most famous passages in the Torah, and it immediately returns to a litany of guidelines that are meant to be stepping stones to holiness that can be part of the lived experience of the Israelites of that era. And so the very next verse is, do not let your cattle mate with a different species, or sow your field with two kinds of seed. This was an agrarian society. This was practical. This was stuff you could do every day, every year on your farm and in your town and your community. And somehow that too was a stepping stone into holiness. The Torah's message is that holiness is meant to pervade all aspects of daily behavior and not only to inhabit the high points of experience. Sanctity is not reserved for the sanctuary, and holiness not just for special occasions and moments in our lives. The ritual laws of the book of Leviticus, even if they feel a little foreign to us who are much more urban than agrarian, even if whole phenomenon of animal sacrifice is something that for us is far from a matter of course, the reality is the Torah here tries to weave together how you attain holiness, from how you worship to how you farm, from how you eat to how you interact with others. The ethical promise of the book of Leviticus may, in fact, not just seem foreign because of all of the items that I already noted, but it may seem somewhat foreign at a time and out of joint with the reality of our day. We, sort of the denizens of the early 21st century, tend to be surprised when we hear reports of altruism, much more so than we hear news of rape or murder. Accounts of genocide and ethnic cleansing remain horrifying, but unfortunately, they are no longer astonishing. Collective decisions for justice, collective acts of self-sacrifice, let alone collective expressions of love, somehow occasion true wonderment because they feel like such a rarity. But the Torah reminds us that everything depends, perhaps now more than ever, on the efforts of every individual in society to rise and aspire to the holiness that is set out here. The Torah reminds us that life is filled with potential holiness, with possibilities of holiness that can be actualized only to the extent that we make the effort to do so in our lives, in our actions, and in our community. And when we do, then the promise of holiness that is manifest in Torah will be manifest in the world around us. Amen. Chaverim, let me invite you to return to your Sidurim.